Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering woke companies panic as Harvard Business Review proves DEI doesn't work. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. The Harvard Business Review is actually a respected business publication. You don't need to read it all the time, but every now and then it's good to look at the Harvard Business Review and see what they're talking about. Now they've kind of figured out that DEI actually isn't working and they need to take some extreme action, or DEI is just not going to continue because it's actually damaging their agenda. Not only is DEI not helping, it's actually making the situation worse. From Harvard Business Review, research, the most common DEI practices actually undermine diversity. By Tracy Stinsman and others. Who's Tracy Stinsman? Well, this is Tracy Stinsman. And I'm not just picking out pictures that make her look crazy. These are the pictures that Tracy puts of herself on the internet. I've got to pick some picture for the thumbnail. Here's another picture of Ms. Stimpson. I don't know. Something's not quite right with the DEI people. They're trying to push an agenda that just doesn't make sense. Somehow it makes them feel good about themselves. By the way, none of the people who worked on this article are people of color. It's all women that look like this that are trying to push their agenda. But Ms. Stinsman has known that this agenda isn't really working and that companies were starting to reject DEI even more than a year ago. From MIT Sloan Management Review, business leaders need to rise above anti-woke attacks. Here's Stinsman's article. Despite their company's pledges to support social justice initiatives and racial and gender equity in recent years, many business leaders are now balking at the label woke, a term that has become a political weapon. Well, it is a political weapon because you're getting called out on something that you labeled yourselves as relevant and important when it's not really relevant or important. It's absurd. It's a ridiculous social justice demand that doesn't actually work either in business or for the people that are supposed to benefit from it. Because when you get a job and it's not merit-based, you're not going to do well at that job. And that's what this other article is about. How do we deal with people who we've given these job opportunities to, but haven't actually done well enough to move into management at these jobs? And of course, you could be merit-based or not be merit-based and equity-based. You're not going to succeed in your career. Careers last decades. You're not going to get special favors for decades. It may last for a couple of years, but eventually employers look to exploit their employees for the most value they can get from their employees. That's the relationship. The employees do it to the employers as well. Employees don't say, let me work for less money just because I've got a white person that's my boss or a person of color that's my boss. They want to get the best compensation they can for their time and their effort because everyone realizes they need to ultimately do what's right for them. Employers do it to employees and employees do it to employers. But the authors assert that addressing inequality and injustice in the workplace and beyond is something leaders must do. They call for leaders to continue to work towards racial and gender inequity and to be conscious of their role in affecting change. Leaders at companies have absolutely no role in affecting change. They have other responsibilities. They have responsibilities to shareholders and to their other employees, and to run a merit-based environment. If they don't run a merit-based environment, they damage the service they're delivering to customers. Ever heard of airplanes falling out of the sky? I mean, that's an extreme example, but it happens on every level. Poor service to customers, less return on investment to owners. That can damage people's retirement when they're investing in public companies. DEI is a nonsense concept, and it always was a nonsense concept. Coming from the Harvard Business Review, research, the most common DEI practices actually undermine diversity. I can't even say that title without cracking up every time, because it just shows no matter how crazy you might be, you can't make something not true true. Merit is what always matters. Despite the US population's growing diversity, managerial roles are still predominantly held by white men. While the largest firms have been pledging to recruit and train black workers for over 40 years, which they have been doing, there has been little increase in black representation in managerial roles during this time frame. Whose fault is that? It's no one's fault. It's a competitive marketplace. There are people of every kind of gender, sexual preference, and color at managerial roles in different companies. But you have to earn those positions or they're not going to last. Women have difficulty attaining leadership roles despite evidence that, quote, women are more likely than men to lead in a style that is effective. Can you possibly imagine if you were responsible for running a company and you took this quote, which by the way also has no citation to it, but you took this quote and you said, you know what, I'm just going to hire a woman to do this management role because, she's a woman. And apparently women are more effective than men are because they can lead in a style that's effective because, their gender. That's kind of ridiculous, of course. You can't put people in management positions or hire people just based on their gender, except for very limited specific situations. So if that's the logic of why we should do more DEI in business, I don't think it's very good logic. Why don't you tell me what you think in the comments below? This management between corporate commitment to diversity and tangible outcomes raises critical questions about the efficacy of management principles for achieving diverse representation. Companies can't really achieve diverse representation. There literally is no way that a company can say, you know what, we're going to go out of our way. We're going to illegally discriminate against people based on their skin color or their gender or their sexual preferences and turn this into a successful business. It just doesn't work that way. I don't know why people think it can work this way. Maybe if you take enough antidepressant medication, it makes you think that it can work this way. Of course, in business, it doesn't work this way. The author's research, published in Business Horizons, examines the degree to which specific management practices are associated with increased or decreased diverse managerial representation and how often organizations implement each practice. How do management practices impact organizational diversity? That's a question that's on the mind of so many managers these days. Of course, managers kind of all right, yeah, whatever. We'll do as much of this as we're forced to do, but realistically, we've got a business to run. Businesses are running in competition with each other. But these ladies go on about their research. Their research draws on data from Dobbin and Kalev across 806 organizations collected between 1971 and 2015, examining the effect of management practices on diverse representation in managerial roles. They extend beyond their work by examining how frequently each management practice is utilized in organizations. Contrasting interventions' effectiveness and prevalence of use in organizations provides crucial insights into why organizations are not making greater progress toward diverse representation. At some point, you can give jobs to people, but they actually do have to do the jobs. One of the things they recommend so strongly is mentoring. If you can get someone, and not just to mentor them in their first couple of days or weeks or even months of work, if you can get someone basically to do the work of the person that they bring in as a diversity hire, that person can be successful at their job because then basically someone else is doing their work and they can take the credit for that work. And then they can move up even higher in the organization. They found the relationship between how often management practices are implemented in organizations and their effectiveness in attaining diverse representation is negative and strong at negative 0.48. This negative correlation indicates that organizations are commonly implementing practices that are ineffective at, and in some cases even harmful to increasing diverse representation, while less commonly implementing practices that positively impact diverse representation. Leaders need to understand which management practices work so they can build a more diverse managerial team. There's just so much power you can give to human resources at a company. Human resources does have a role at the company, but human resources can't actually take over the entire operation of the company. Human resources is something a company can indulge in because it's making money, because it's doing well enough to stay in business. At the point where the focus on human resources and diversity goals becomes more important than the product that you sell, more important than the service you deliver, more important than customer satisfaction for whatever it is that your customer makes or does, that's where it's obviously all going to completely collapse. And what all of this research so far seems to have proven, and proven pretty successfully, is that diversity, equity, and inclusion is not good for the company, it's not good for the employees, and it's not good for the customers. Here are some examples of management practices that they've analyzed and their effectiveness for increasing managerial diversity versus prevalence. Prevalence meaning how often you see it at a company. Management practice, Chief Diversity Officer and Diversity Task Force. Literally a diversity task force inside of your company, a human resources attack team sent to attack departments if they're not pushing social agendas enough and they're wasting too much of their time trying to make money for the company. Fortunately, that's relatively infrequent at companies. Formal mentoring. What is that? The organization pairs mentees with mentors. So someone else can help you do your work so that you don't have to just be burdened with, God forbid, doing your actual job when you're actually being paid to do work at a company. Fortunately, that's also infrequent. Childcare. On-site childcare vouchers, and referral programs for childcare. That's also not effective, and it's moderately frequent. Flex time. Employees are permitted to adjust their work hours, because why should you have to waste most of your life working? You're not independently wealthy, but why don't you pretend you are? Let your company pay for it. Have unlimited flex time to work whenever it is that you feel like working. There are companies that actually provide that, and if the company can afford to provide that, and it's successful and the person's productive, they produce work that can be converted into customer satisfaction somehow, okay, that's great. What's the function of it? It helps women and people of color with disruptive work-life challenges. I don't know why people of color need flex time compared to white people, but none of that seems to make any sense. How about parental leave? You get time off work for new parents. It certainly seems appropriate to give parental leave to new parents. There's nothing more important than being able to spend time with your children. And ultimately, you are human beings working for a company. That priority is more important than work. And if companies can afford to provide that and pay for that, that's fantastic. Some companies have diversity goals, diversity-related numeric hiring and promotional targets. That's actually illegal. Some companies do have that. Most companies are phasing that out. And why phase something like that out? Well, because it's illegal and a lot of companies are getting sued over it. Cross-training. Workers rotate through a range of jobs. Doing that makes sense for all employees. You don't have to look a certain way or have a certain skin color. Now, here are some of the elements they found in their research that actually damage diversity specifically. Performance evaluations. Performance evaluations? Like, don't you actually need performance evaluations? No, not when you've got diversity. These may prevent a false sense that personnel practices are fair. Yeah, because if you don't do well on your performance evaluation, you don't want to have the impression that there was any kind of fair assessment of that employee. You want to just say, look, can't you see the skin color of this person? Don't you sense what their gender might actually be? Don't say what it is. They need to say what it is for themselves, of course. Don't go by a performance evaluation. That destroys diversity. How about this? Diversity and harassment training. What is that? It's training to reduce discrimination and prevent harassment. But what's the result of it? Focusing on legal consequences and blame causes participants to react with resistance. Another damaging corporate practice, grievance procedures. What are those? Those are procedures to report discrimination and sexual harassment. Because employees rarely file complaints and are disincentivized to file grievances. Well, because if you're an employee and you're working at a company and you don't fit in there for whatever the reason is, it's not always fair. When we were kids, if our dad gave a cookie to our brother and we didn't get a cookie, we'd want to know, why? That's not fair. Give me my cookie too. Which is why parents try to do equal things for their children. This is not that at work. And if you're someone working at work and they're not treating you the same as everyone else, it's usually merit-based because people only care about the work when you're at a company. They're not really interested in pushing an agenda unless they look like this lady or they're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're really just concerned with, look, as a boss, because I'm a boss now, when I give work to someone, I want them to just do the work. That's it. I'm not looking to save the world or create a diverse situation or prevent a diverse situation. I've worked with people of all genders and skin colors and things like that. And I'm interested in what that person can do and what I can count on them to do. What I know if I give them, they're going to do, and they're going to do in a capable way. Because when they don't do it in a capable way, it's a problem. It's not a problem for them. It's a problem for me. And then I make it a problem for them because I don't want people giving me incomplete work. I can't do what I want to do unless the people who help me do that do a good job at it. I have people I can count on to do things for me who I know have done things for me in the past and it's worked out. I do try to work with new people. I'm open-minded about that because any one new person can be an absolute gem and frankly make you a ton of money and really help get your work done. So you have to be open-minded that way. But if you tell me that my job is to hire people for the purpose of trying to create some kind of gender equity or something like that, or race equity, whatever. It's impossible. It would be drops of water in the ocean anyway. Of course it doesn't work. So anything outside of merit is destructive for promoting individuals. It doesn't matter what their skin color is. Job tests for managers. Assessments administered to applicants. And of course, one of the worst things you could do is give a job test for your managers. Why is that a problem? Because they may provide a false sense that personnel practices are fair. Well, maybe personnel practices are fair. Listen, for people that have nothing better to do than insult people by telling them, look, I don't care about your work. I only care if you're a woman or a man or have this skin color or that ethnic background. If you're one of those people, okay, you're one of those people. Someone is subsidizing you. You're not actually productive. For the rest of us who are productive, who are concerned with producing something that a customer would say, I'm satisfied with that, and then hopefully become a repeat customer. We don't have time for any of this nonsense. It doesn't work in business, and it doesn't help the individual. This is how bad these people are. They're still using the term Latinx. In describing this chart, they said this: their effectiveness is the average percent change in managerial representation across 7 demographic groups: white women, black men, Latinx women, Latinx men, Asian women, and Asian men. Latin people don't appreciate the term Latinx. That's not something they want to be called. It's not an identity they want to associate with. From Google, Latinos offended by Latinx. Some Latinos have expressed offense or discomfort with the term Latinx, which was created to replace the gendered words Latino and Latina. According to a 2021 poll, 40%, not some, not 5% or 3%, 40% of Hispanic and Latin individuals found the term Latinx offensive and bothersome. Other critiques include this: Latinx erases identity. Some say the term erases a key part of Latin American language and identity by replacing it with an English word. Because Latino and Latina is not an English word. This is an English word that takes away all of your Spanish heritage. We're just going to take it away because it makes people like this lady a little bit more satisfied with herself. But that's not all. Latinx ignores gender-neutral alternatives. Non-binary Latinos, yes, there are some of those out there, not 40%, but some percentage, whose first language is not English, have criticized the term for favoring Latin Americans who can easily pronounce the X ending while ignoring gender-neutral alternatives like -E, like Latin. Okay, that's good for them. Some also say using Latinx with gendered nouns in English like Latinx men and women, like we just did in this Harvard Business Review article, is oxymoronic and goes against the term's original purpose of transcending the gender binary. Well, that said, 40% of Hispanic and Latin individuals finding the term Latinx offensive and bothersome should be enough to get the term retired and not used anymore. It should be rejected. But even today, even in Harvard Business Review, they're still using the term even though people don't want to be associated with it. These people who are pushing this diversity stuff will eventually disappear. Sooner than later, people will stop subsidizing this nonsensical research and let companies get back to the business of taking care of their customers and give employees an opportunity to build a real career based on real merit for the quality work that they're able to do. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.